Sure. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that. I think we should start off by recognizing that February is Black History Month. Typically, this would be an opportunity for us at the Police Bureau to be out in the community, engaging, connecting with folks, and having further conversations, around racial inequities and racial justice and things of that nature. The pandemic's taken away some of those opportunities from us, but I think it's really important that we recognize the rich tradition and the Black community here in Portland has a rich history locally and nationally, and it's very important. So I just wanted to highlight that first, right off the bat. And also, the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing is actually sending out a survey to community to around core police services to get a sense of what the community's priorities are, what they'd like to see in terms of community policing and community safety. So I encourage people to participate in that process too, so we get a sense of what's important to the community.
Absolutely. The main topic of the day is staff reorganization that is effective today. Press release went out earlier on this. So would you talk about the reorganization and what it's about, where it came from?
Sure. So this reorganization is primarily designed to save overtime. We're looking at our staffing, our call times, and it's a priority for us to be able to answer calls for 911 service. This move doesn't put additional officers on the street. We still have the same amount of officers we have, but now our precincts will be able to staff without using as much overtime. It was a difficult decision because the places we pulled officers from were doing great and important work. We moved officers from our traffic division, our K-9 unit, our narcotics unit, community engagement, our public information office. And the goal was really to get more resources back to the precinct. But I do want to just stress to everyone, those folks who we did move back to patrol, we're doing really important work for the city, and it's not a reflection of the work that was being done, but it was a necessity to save on overtime.
Yeah, and we're looking at the lowest number of sworn employees right now, and we want to talk about that plays a role here.
Sure.
We have fewer people. So the changes are not really aimed at the alarming rise in shootings and homicides that we've been seeing in recent months. What is the Police Bureau doing about that topic, though, at this point?
Sure, that's definitely a concern for us. We've been having conversations for the last several weeks. I think we submitted a plan around Christmas of what we could do as a police bureau to kind of address some of the shootings. We've been having regular conversations since then about what's the best way to engage in that work. We've had regional conversations with a lot of partners as well, talking about what resources we could bring to bear. And I think it's important to balance the urgency of this crisis, but also be thoughtful on what we implement, how we implement it, how we communicate it to community, so we don't run into some of the same issues we've had previously. So I think we'll have probably something soon in place, but it's definitely an ongoing regular discussion, trying to figure out what the best way is and who has what resources to bring to bear.
Okay. And before we turn it over to questions, we've had a lot of talk about the challenges here at the Police Bureau, but given that we're kind of bringing everyone together, I'd like to have you talk about what you see as the most positive things that are happening here at the Police Bureau.
No, I like to talk about positive things, so that is good. There's a lot going on that I think is positive. We're doing some great work around equity and inclusion. Our equity manager and his team are rolling out some new trainings. We're doing trainings around equity, anti-racism, and we're really trying to focus on bringing these conversations to the Police Bureau. I think having an environment where these conversations can take place is really important. We're also recently able to open our gyms to let small amounts of people use them to contribute to their wellness, and that's important to us as well. We've started our Train the Trainer program around active bystander for law enforcement. That's an important training that'll address officers' ability to intervene if they see something that they think is going wrong. It really puts into practice the directive we have about a duty to intervene. So that's really exciting and looking forward to that. And, I think really it's been a tough month because this month we've seen, I think, 38 people leave in the month of January alone. And that's a large number for a bureau our size. And we've seen a lot of good people leave for retirements and some to separations, but there's a lot of good people who remain here and they do hard work and good work every day. They're resilient, and I always want to take the opportunity to thank them for their work and let them know that I appreciate it. The team here appreciates it, and a lot of people in the city appreciate it too.
Okay, good. So now we're going to open it up for questions. So as I mentioned before, those of you on the Zoom call, please raise your hand and we'll call on you for it. Our call manager will unmute you and so that you can ask your question. So first question is Wright Gazaway. Go ahead, as soon as you're unmuted, Wright, go ahead with your question.
Chief, thanks. I've spoken with some families of victims from homicides last year. Some of them feel like their children's case will not be solved due to the sheer volume. Can you tell me how many officers and detectives you have working homicide cases and what you're doing as chief to make sure these families can get that closure?
Yeah, thanks, Wright. Those cases are important to us. We're doing everything we can to investigate them. We put additional resources in the detective division to address shootings and homicides. We have 2 sergeants and I think 11 now officers who are working on that effort. We have had a homicide unit that's really built for a certain number of homicides in the city of Portland. That number is probably around 30, and their workload has about doubled, and we have the same amount of people doing that work. So those cases are important. We're getting to them. There is a high volume and a limited resource, but we're doing our very best to resource to get the families the closure and the accountability that they deserve.
So you would support getting more detectives in there for this caseload?
Yeah, I definitely would. We promoted 7 detectives today to the detective division, and my hope is that they'll be a help to the investigations that take place. We have right now, as of today, 76 detectives. We're an agency that at one time had 120-ish. So that gives you a sense of kind of where we are staffing-wise in the detective division.
Okay, I am seeing some folks in the chat that are still having trouble finding the raise hand function. Just make sure that you click on participants, and then it should be in the column on the right. I see you've got questions. I'm going to try to get to everybody. So next person in line is Noelle Crombie. Go ahead, Noelle.
Hi, good afternoon, Chief. I reported over the weekend about an allegation made by District Attorney Mike Schmidt, who told me that a Portland police officer apparently took a screenshot from a mobile data terminal showing his home address, and that image ended up on a website operated by a police officer out of state. The DA told me the incident is the subject of an internal affairs investigation in your bureau. What is the police bureau doing in response to that incident? Have you identified the officer responsible? And what do you say about the apparent breach of privacy involving an elected official?
I'm not aware of that particular incident, but that's not something that we would support. We take, elected officials' privacy seriously, and we have an accountability system that we do internal investigations with, and I trust that if it's in that process, that it'll get looked at and it'll get resolved accordingly. But here we take that kind of stuff seriously. We've seen in our city where some elected officials have been the target of protesters and things of that nature. And we definitely don't want to be a contributor to that. So.
Okay, thank you. Maxine Bernstein is up next.
Hi, Chief. Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on that, but I have 2 separate questions. Let me ask those questions. But one is, you mentioned the December 23rd report on gun violence that you submitted to the mayor. And in that, you promoted or you proposed having a dedicated team of uniformed patrol actually respond and follow up on these shootings. What's happened to that? Have you put that in place at all? And if not, why not?
Yeah, there's been a lot of conversations since that memo was submitted. A lot of partners have come to the table, and I think, we recognize that this is a regional problem, and this is not a solution that the police can address alone. So a lot of the conversations around what resources the police can provide, but also what our other partners can do, what other agencies in the local area can contribute. And I think it's something that we really need to be thoughtful about. We at Portland Police want to be a part of any solution that's going to address gun violence and keep the community safer. But we know we're not the only agency or the only real driver of that. So we're engaged in these conversations on a regular basis, and I think we're going to come up with something that's effective and collaborative to address shootings and bring those numbers down.
Okay, my second question regards the COCOL's findings that the Bureau is not in compliance with its use of force reporting, particularly during protests and reviews. What, if anything, is the Bureau doing to address that? And also, just a follow-up to Noelle's, you said you're not aware of the incident that the DA is on the record saying an officer, doxed him, but with a screenshot of the MDT. I just wondered how you can't be aware of it as chief.
Yeah, I wish I was aware of everything that happened. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I have a team of people in investigations who, work on these things as well. And I'll tell you frankly, I don't know everything that happens everywhere at every moment. Things come to my attention when they get to certain stages. But to your COCO question, we're working hard to get back into compliance on those topics. What we saw this summer was really unprecedented. Our system of review for use of force and things of that nature as they apply to protests were not built for 170-ish nights of crowd control and mass gathering. So we are looking at our systems, and it's very difficult when you have so many incidents over ended up being a long period of time, but nightly things, and you have to now have a system that was built for maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 events a year protest wise, and now you have 170-ish back to back. So we're really trying to figure out how we can refine that, how we could bring more people into the review process, do the reviews more efficiently. But the system that we had was really just not built for what we experienced this summer.
All right, thanks. I want to give everybody a chance. So I'm moving on to Sarah Hurwitz. Go ahead, Sarah.
Thanks, Chief. Hey, we've talked to several neighbors who are concerned about their safety night after night with shootings, particularly in the southeast Portland area. And they say they feel that there's a correlation between the dramatic spike that we've seen in shootings and the absence of the GVRT. Do you feel that this team should be reinstated?
I was sad to see GVRT go away. I felt that they did a really good job. They did important work. They did that work well. And I think we do need a group of people, a team of some type to address this work. I mean, it's some of the most important work in our city right now. People are being injured, people are losing their lives to shootings. And I do think that we need a comprehensive effort. I don't know if it has to be, PPB led or PPB only. Maybe it's something that's a conglomerate of different regional or local agencies, but I do feel like they did good work, that they were a real contributor to keeping, to reducing gun violence. I mean, we still had shootings when we had GVRT, but we had less than we do today. But I think really we look at what's in front of us in this spike and this rise in shootings, and we need to figure out a solution that's going to work and be sustainable in order to address it.
Okay, Mike Benner is up next for his question. Go ahead, Mike.
Hey there, Chief. Thanks for giving us a few minutes, kind of jumping off of Sarah's question there. I am curious. I mean, I'm hearing the same thing about people thinking there's a direct correlation between the disbanding of the unit and the jump in gun violence. What do you think? Do you think there is a correlation? Because if you look at the month that the team was disbanded, and that's kind of when these numbers started jumping. So I'm curious what you actually personally think. And then also, you've hinted at it a couple times now, that you guys are working on something to address this problem. Can you give us a little more, because this is top of mind for so many people right now, and I think people want to hear from you about how we're going to crack down on this and crack down on it quickly.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. I appreciate the question. You know, me, I think DVRT as it was would be helping us, you know, keeping these numbers lower. We had, you know, a focus and a structure. And I think that's probably the most important thing to look at and think of. We had a structure that took us, you know, a couple of years to build in collaboration with a lot of partners and folks even in California who were doing this work and giving some advice. And we put together a structure to help us address what was then a really big problem and is now an even bigger problem. And I think even the loss of that structure has made some of the other people who were combating gun violence, has made their jobs harder because they don't have this resource and this group that was out there with frequent contacts, you know, to draw information from. And it made the work of, you know, probation and parole and some outreach partners' jobs more difficult. And then you had a second part to your question around what's being done. And this is, I know it's a top of mind issue. It's a top of mind issue for me here at the Police Bureau and for all of us. We want to be out doing that work and playing a role in reducing this, but we know we can't reduce it alone. And we could, you know, take officers from patrol or wherever and put them in investigations. We've done that. We're looking at, you know, potentially doing something else with some other partners or doing, you know, something that's proposed in our memo, but those resources still come from somewhere else. And then that's other work that's impacted. So I think right now it's really about how can we build something that's robust enough, that brings enough people to the table where we can have resources, not only operationally, but also investigatively. So it's about really trying to build or reconstruct a system that'll allow us to do the things we need to do with enough resources to not only, you know, hopefully have some deterrent and operational piece, but also have the investigative resources too to solve crimes and hold people accountable. There's definitely a lot of discussion going on, but I think we're really getting close to putting together some type of structure to really employ soon to address gun violence.
Okay, Alex Zielinski is up with your question. Go ahead, Alex.
Hey, yeah, thank you. Chief, you mentioned there were 38 sworn officers who left in the last month, and some of those were separations. Did they state kind of why they left? Do you believe that there is a retention problem? And kind of what do you think is the case for such a high uptick in folks resigning?
Yeah, I think, do we have the exact numbers? I want to say it was 14. Yeah, 14 separations maybe, and the rest were retirements in January or something to that effect. And people have their own reasons, but I think, you know, this summer was really tough on officers. I think it was really something that took its toll on people and maybe made them maybe want to rethink kind of their next steps in their career, or, you know, maybe some other options. And it's a lot of it is, you know, what's best for them and their families too. I can't say specifically what makes people leave, but I think, you know, it's important that we collectively, you know, support our police officers. They go out and do hard work every day, and they're good people. They care about this community, and they want to give good service. And I think, you know, that message was sometimes not at the forefront over the last 7-8 months. And I think, you know, that has takes its toll on people. People are human, and they, you know, they want to come out and do their work and be appreciated and feel like they're supported. So I think that's definitely a factor.
Yeah, I think the number that I have, she's accurate in going back to July of last year, 37 or 38 resignations, about 73 retirements. So I don't have the January numbers in front of me. Okay, moving on. I know that Gillian Flaccus had a question as well. So we'll come to her after this, but Jonathan Levinson is next in line here. So Jonathan, if you can unmute and go ahead with your question. I am not hearing you. If you could double check.
I just put on a big show for my living room. Are you making any changes to use of force policies in terms of like passive active resistance or officer accountability in light of likely falling out of compliance with the DOJ settlement?
You know, that's something we're constantly working with DOJ on. I mean, we have regular conversations with them. I think it's important to note too that, you know, for the last 8 years, we've been working with Department of Justice under a settlement agreement to refine policies and training. And I think all the policies we have now are DOJ approved. So we're still working through that process. We make tweaks and changes to those as necessary. But that's just a very fluid, live conversation. And you know, my short answer would be, yeah, I'm sure we're going to change different policies continuously into the future as, you know, things arise and things change.
Great. All right, Gillian Flaccus, go ahead.
Yes, hi, Chief. You know, Measure 110, which reduced the penalties for small personal use amount of certain drugs, went into effect this week. And I'm curious as your take on that. I know a lot of police chiefs and district attorneys and some law enforcement were against it during the election. How do you see that playing out? How do you think that will impact the situation downtown right now? And how will it affect the work that your force does?
Yeah, that's a good question. That comes up periodically. You know, that just went into effect, so it's real early to tell right now. But it's definitely a concern for me. And I think, you know, especially now at this time where we're taking some resources from our narcotics unit, who is doing overdose investigation and things of that nature. And then I think, you know, you take into account that the voters in Oregon have spoken, and laws change all the time, and we're pretty flexible, and we have to operate under whatever the laws are. But it does concern me. I don't want to see, you know, spikes in overdose deaths. And, you know, we have officers who are adept at going to do that. Now they're assigned elsewhere, so their ability to do that is lessened as well. And I think the presence of fentanyl, too, I think poses a particular problem as well when it comes to overdose and lethality. So I think it's something we're going to have to monitor closely. But it is definitely something that concerns me. And it's something we're going to watch closely here.
Okay, Keaton Thomas is in the chat, and he had a question for a while. So Keaton, if you can unmute and go ahead with your question.
Great, thank you. I assume you guys can hear me because I'm unmuted. Chief, I was just looking at some of the budget request documents as it relates to the 5% reduction requested by the mayor. Can you give me an idea or give the community an idea of what they can expect should the Bureau ultimately need to cut 5% of their budget? And did your guys' announcement this morning as it relates to trying to curb overtime, does that play into a role in trying to reduce costs for the Bureau?
Yeah, it definitely does. Overtime is one of those places where, you know, you can cut. A lot of our money is invested in people, and we want to keep good people here working at the Police Bureau. So overtime is something we will look to cut because that's a fairly large number that we can try to whittle down. If we're staffed fully, our overtime spend would be a lot less. And I think, you know, we recognize that the city is going to have some financial impacts due to COVID, but we're in a position too as an agency where we've lost 110 people since April 1st, and we haven't been able to replace any of them. And for an agency our size, that's a big hit. And we know we need to get back to being able to hire. That's going to be critical for us. And when you take into account the fact that it takes about 6 months to get someone actually hired and then 18 months of training to get them to be a fully trained, able to work the street by themselves police officer. That's a 2-year lead time. So anytime you have these gaps in hiring, it's problematic. And as we lose people, if we can't replace them, I feel we're going to fall perilously short. So for us, it's really balancing our desperate need to hire and also being mindful that, the city does have some real challenges as far as budget.
All right, thanks, Keaton, for the question. Lisa Balick is next in line. Go ahead, Lisa.
Hi, Chief.
Hey, Lisa.
How do you see a revamped GVRT would be different than what was there before? And what's with the wait, considering what's going on nightly in the streets?
Yeah, I think, in terms of our efforts to address gun violence, I think it's really not so much a revamped GVRT. I think it's about how do we do that work better? Is there a way where we can engage in it that we don't run into, some of the issues we ran into with GVRT and gang enforcement team prior to that? I think, is there a way where we can improve the way we do that work? Can we make it more transparent? Can we make it more supported by the community? Maybe there's some community oversight we could build in. Maybe there's some more partners that can bring things to bear that make the work, more efficient. And I think that's really the struggle and the issue now. I think, the idea people have of just, reinventing GVRT, I'm not sure that would serve us necessarily best in the long run if it ran into the same issues. So we want to be mindful about what we can put together to address this that's going to be efficient, effective, and sustainable.
Okay, we have about 2 more minutes. I see Jonathan Levinson had one follow-up question. So Jonathan, why don't you ask your question and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I wanted to come back real quick to the settlement agreement. The Bureau's handling of mental health was one of the root causes of it. Can you explain why you chose to make the reductions to the behavioral health unit? And are you worried at all that taking officers away from behavioral health might impact compliance for the years to come?
Yeah, I think that's always a concern. I think for me, our behavioral health unit was staffed one over what our DOJ requirement number was. And with the current pandemic, there was, less actual interaction going on between some of the clientele and our members in that unit. And, just looking at our org chart and where you can pull 100 people from such a lean organization is difficult. So I think every choice we made of, where to get an officer from was a tough choice. But the behavioral health unit, they do great work. We're definitely invested in that work, and we want to make sure that they're, equipped to continue that work. That is a big part of our settlement agreement with the Department of Justice as well. But yeah, I just want everyone to understand that these moves are definitely hard made, and they're thought out as best as can be. But it's very difficult to look at our organization and figure out where you're going to get, 100 bodies to put back to patrol. And we didn't even reach our goal of, our initial goal. So we took a number shorter than what we wanted because we didn't want to really have negative impacts on the other work that some of the specialty units were doing.